Hey guys, welcome back. So today we're going to talk about adjusting the PT2 pedal set. Now, as you can see, I've got my pedal set on my mounting plate, so I need to get all the pedals off the mounting plate, and we're going to talk about adjusting each pedal individually. Alright, so the first pedal I want to talk about is the throttle pedal. Now, before I even begin talking about adjustments, I want to mention that the PT2 is basically the same as the PT1 with a few minor differences, and we're going to go over those differences throughout the video. So let's get started. Alright, so the first adjustment I want to talk about is adjusting the pedal face. Now, this seems like an obvious adjustment, but I do want to mention that if you want to go up or down, if you want to slide the pedal face up or down, you don't actually have to remove and replace the bolts in these locations. You can just loosen these two bolts and you can slide the pedal face up or down. It does have a max height of about right there, so if you want to go any higher, you can remove the bolts and then place the bolts in these positions. Tighten them back up and you're good to go. Alright, so the next adjustment I want to talk about is the tension, and that is how hard it is to press on the pedal. Now, whenever you make an adjustment on the tension in this slot, you're going to have to pay attention to what happens back here, and I'll explain why that is in a second. In order to loosen this, you just need an Allen wrench, 5mm, and a 10mm wrench. Now, we do provide the Allen wrench in the accessory package that comes in the box. Whenever you do this, this affects what happens in the back, so let me explain why that is. Whenever you adjust this up or down, this needs to rotate as well. So what you need to do is you need to loosen these two bolts, one on each side. See, it moved right there. You can see why it moved. Loosen one on either side, and once it's back into position, you can tighten it back down. Now, as a precaution, when you do want to make an adjustment up here, you can loosen these two bolts first, so that way you don't have to come back here and mess with it afterwards. But this bracket should always be 90 degrees to this shaft. If it's kind of cockeyed or off center, you're going to want to make sure it's straight again. Okay, so let's talk about adjusting the pedal angle, and that is the angle at which the pedal arm sits, this way or that way. There are two ways you can do this. The first way is rather obvious. You can see in the back there's a slot right here where you can loosen these two bolts on either side. I'll go ahead and do that now. Loosen this one. And I'll loosen this one. And as you can see, this should slide up or down. Now, I like it right where it was, so I'm going to keep it right about there. So I'm going to tighten that back down. Tighten it on both sides. Now, there's another way you can make the pedal angle adjustment, and that is by loosening this nut and this nut on the very back right here. And here, let me go ahead and show you that. I made a little special tool to loosen this. Okay, so now whenever you want to make a finer tuned adjustment for the pedal angle, what you can do is you can loosen this. I'll loosen it by hand. And then I've got my fancy power tool here. You can screw this nut in on the back. Oh, going the wrong way there. And as you can see, it brings back the pedal just like that. And now we've adjusted the pedal angle. Okay, so now that we have the pedal angled the way that we want it, I want to talk about the bump stop, because anytime you adjust the pedal angle, you're going to need to adjust the bump stop. So the newer version just has a bolt on top that you can loosen. I'll loosen it by hand here. All you need to do is loosen that bolt, and you can slide this in or out just like that. It's very easy to do. Once you get the bump stop where you want it, you can tighten it by hand there. And it usually shouldn't move, but I would tighten it using an Allen wrench. Once it's nice and tight, you're good to go. It's that easy. Alright, so I brought the camera in closer so I could show you the potentiometer arm. Now the angle of this potentiometer arm is actually pretty important. Anytime you make an adjustment with the pedal angle, you want to make sure you check the angle of this potentiometer arm. You always want this arm to be facing slightly forward. And right now it's a little bit too vertical, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to loosen the bolt over here on this side on the pedal arm, and then pull this rod right here and pull it forward a little bit. Now I'm going to use some special tools here, but we do provide an Allen wrench to loosen this bolt, and you can get a small pair of pliers to get the nut on this side of the pedal arm. Now this is a view from the other side. As you can see, it's angled more towards the front of the pedal, and that's exactly what you want. Okay, so now let's talk about the brake pedal. Now there aren't a whole lot of adjustments that you can make with the brake pedal. You have the same adjustment as with the throttle for the pedal face. You have the same adjustment for the tension, but other than that, there's really not much you can do as far as adjustments with the brake. Now you can also adjust the angle by adjusting these two nuts on both ends, but you don't have the slot. There's nothing attached back here for you to make fine-tune adjustments for the brake. Most of the adjustments that you're going to make with the brake pedal are going to be electronically, so we'll go over that when we get to that portion of the video. Alright, now that leads us to the clutch pedal. Now the first thing I want to do is kind of explain how this clutch pedal works. Now you can see we've attached two extra springs here in the back on the sides, and that is for the clutch mechanism. The clutch mechanism is meant to simulate a real clutch in a real car. Now when you press on the clutch pedal, you'll get a little bit of resistance right at the beginning of the stroke, and then not much resistance as you get back to the back of the stroke. And when you let off, you'll feel that resistance change again right when you get to the beginning of the stroke. If you've ever driven a car with a stick shift, then you kind of know what I'm referring to. Alright, so now let's talk about the adjustments on the clutch pedal. And the first thing I want to mention is you don't want to mess with this upper tie rod. You want to leave that right where it is. You can see it's inside this slot, but you want to keep it all the way at the top, and that's crucial for the operation of the mechanism here in the back. Now you can still adjust the tension on the main spring by moving this up or down in the slot as needed. But you do want to be careful that this rod end down here does not hit this rod end when going up and down in this slot. Now as with the throttle pedal, the same adjustment applies to the clutch pedal with regard to the potentiometer arm. You want this potentiometer arm facing towards the front. You can also adjust the pedal angle in the same way that you can adjust the pedal angle on the throttle pedal. You can adjust it back here, or you can adjust the two nuts right here. Alright, so now let's talk about adjusting the mechanism itself. Anytime you make an adjustment to the angle of the pedal arm, front or back, it's going to change the position of this mechanism on this track. So in order to adjust this mechanism either forwards or backwards, you just need to loosen this nut and this nut. I'll go ahead and take my special tool that I made here, and I'll loosen this nut, and I'll loosen this nut. And once they're loose, you can actually move them by hand here, loosen it by hand, and you can move this forwards or backwards. You can see there's a metal sleeve inserted into the plastic here, and don't worry about that sticking out, because once you tighten these two down, it'll go back inside this plastic. So I'm going to go ahead and adjust it just slightly forward, just like that. Move this up, tighten it back down. Once I have it where I want it, I'll go ahead and tighten this back down again. You can use a 10mm wrench. As a matter of fact, I've got one right here. I'll go ahead and tighten this back down. You don't need to over tighten it, but you want to make sure there's a good bit of resistance right there. Okay, I've got it where I want it, and that's it. Now this gives you the opportunity to adjust how the clutch feels with this mechanism. You can put the mechanism more towards the rear so there's not as much resistance when you're pressing on the pedal, but you want to make sure that you don't go back too far, otherwise the mechanism could slide off the back. Okay, so now let's talk about adjusting the pedal set electronically. These pedal sets use potentiometers and of course a load cell for the brake. Now I've gone ahead and plugged in my pedal set into my computer, my laptop, and I've opened up DI-View. Now I would recommend using either DI-View or DX-Tweak to make these adjustments, but for right now I'm going to use DI-View because that's what I have on my computer and it's easiest for me to operate. Okay, so in the top right hand corner of the screen you'll see that I've got DI-View open and I've got the window open for the throttle pedal, and I'll make sure you guys can see that. Now I press on the throttle, you can see the slider moving around just like that. But you can see that the slider is kind of, it's kind of in the center there, hanging around maybe a quarter of the way up. And you want it to be back down to 0. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a small flathead screwdriver like this. Make sure it's a skinny one. Don't want a real thick one, otherwise it won't fit through this hole. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stick the screwdriver right through this hole, and the potentiometer has a little slot in it. Right there you can fit the screwdriver. Now as I turn the potentiometer, you'll notice you can see the slider moving just like that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate the potentiometer back right to where it says almost 0. And that's good right about there. So now it's at 0. Let me go ahead and press on it again. You can see it's a nice range of motion, but you can also see that it doesn't go all the way to 100%. Now, that's absolutely normal. These potentiometers, the way that our pedals are set up, the potentiometer will not have its full range of motion. In order to have the full range of motion, the potentiometer would have to rotate about 270 degrees. And as you can see, when I press on the throttle pedal here, the potentiometer doesn't rotate anywhere near 270 degrees. There are some ways that you can adjust this. You can move this bolt down in this slot on the potentiometer arm a little bit to get more range of motion, but it really shouldn't affect your gameplay in any way. Now I do want to mention that this is why it's important that you get everything set up mechanically before you make any adjustments with the electronics, because inevitably you'll have to go back and adjust that potentiometer. Now I've moved the pedal so you can see this a little bit better, but you can see the angle of the arm. It's facing forward, just like that. You can even move it a little bit more forward if you want to, and if you don't have enough room on the pedal arm up here, you can take this rod off and you can twist these rod ends in a little bit so that you can shorten the length on this rod. And once you shorten the length on the rod, then you can have more room to adjust up front. Okay, so the last thing I want to talk about with the electronics is the brake pedal. Now there's really nothing special that you have to do with the electronics on the brake pedal, but I do want to talk about the control box and the adjustment knob here up on top. Now normally the brake pedal is very sensitive. If you press on the brake here, I can do it by hand. I can almost go 50% or even over that just by doing it by hand, as you can see, just like that. Now if you want less sensitivity, all you have to do is just turn this knob just like that. And you can even turn the sensitivity all the way off. See, it's all the way off right now, so pressing on the pedal, no input at all. Alright guys, I think that about covers it. As you can see, all the adjustments that you need to make on the pedal sets here are really quite easy. And again, as long as you get everything set up mechanically first, the electronics part should go very smoothly. Alright guys, well that's it for now. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to get in touch with me either through the website or on the forums. We will see you next time.